Welcome to the Heart of Law podcast. My name is Mirena and I'm your host. I started this platform a little over a year ago to stay in touch with people I work with and get to know them better, but also meet new people in the legal industry where I get to explore the business and the profession of law. Every guest that I've had has inspired me, given me new ideas to look at the world and the legal industry from a new lens. And as ideas keep flowing, so has my approach to my own business. Today, I'm excited to talk to Andrew Finkelstein, a trial lawyer that has built an empire by trying cases one at a time. He lectures attorneys across the country on best practices and has mastered both the profession of law and the business side of law. Andrew is managing partner of 5 different law firms in several states. He's a highly regarded attorney, father, husband, businessman, author, and more. His new book, I Hope We Never Meet, is a really good book, and it will be a focal point in this interview today. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for such a lovely introduction. I've never heard empire before. I'll push back on that a little bit. And I want to thank you for including my wife and kids in your introduction, because I'm still catching it from them related to the book that I did not dedicate them or even mention them in my book. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, look, I think the book was such a love passion project for the work that you do. So I can see that, and I can see how your wife would say something like that, but we will make sure we talk about them and how they impact your life every day. So you practice in New York, in New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. You are a managing partner in 5 different law firms. And through Smart Tech, you operate essentially as one large firm with 5 different brands. Are all these firms that you founded, or did you acquire them over time? Tell me the story.
The first firm was founded by my dad in 1959. I joined him straight out of law school in 1991, went to Brooklyn Law. He went to Brooklyn Law. And once I joined, I realized I could find a career in that organization. It wasn't my goal to practice law, but I swiftly understood that it was something that I would really want to do. And we wanted to grow the practice. At the time, it was in the Hudson Valley, 1 office, 1 location. I had handling catastrophic injury cases, doing the of counsel work for dozens and dozens of lawyers and firms. But we had the majority of the marketplace in the Hudson Valley. So we sat down, my dad and our partners, we had 3 other partners at the time, and decided to grow geographically. And once we decided to grow geographically, because we couldn't grow as much within our own marketplace, it required some serious questions to be answered on how to do it the most efficient way. And the core question to be answered is, where's the work going to be done? Will it be done in a remote office, or will we do it centrally? And since we were all in the central 1 office, we said, let's create a strategy where everything is done centrally so we can make sure we have great quality control, and what we need in the outside offices is solely related to appearing in court. So what we made sure we did was we became paperless. And by 1995, we were 100% paperless, which then allowed us to move documents back and forth really easily. And it may sound a little crazy because of the way the world is now, but the world was all paper back then. We were, I don't know if we were truly the first law firm to be 100% paperless, but if we weren't, we're right up there at the beginning. And by doing that, that enabled us to be able to grow geographically. We opened up one office, then another, and then really in a short period of time, we were throughout the state. And because of that technology, Jacoby and Myers, Gail Koffs, she was one of the founding partners, approached me and asked if I would be interested in getting involved in her practice as well. I'm going to really make the story short, and the answer was yes. So in 1999, we took over Jacoby and Myers and rolled their operation into our operation, and were able to operate their firm the same way we operate our own firm. So we blended the practices, but kept two separate law firms with two separate identities, but the same staff. 2 years thereafter, Marvin Anderman of Fine, Olin and Anderman reached out to me and asked me to do the same thing. The challenge with Marvin was that his practice centered on areas of work that we did not do, which was workers' compensation, Social Security, disability. So within 6 weeks, we reprogrammed our system to be able to bring in and handle in a totally paperless way workers' compensation. His footprint pretty much matched my footprint. So we then joined forces with Fine, Olin and Anderman. That was our third firm in 2001. In 2007, 8, 9, something like that. I don't remember the exact year. Another good friend of mine, I did not know Marvin, I did not know Gail, but this time a very good friend of mine who had a practice and was looking to retire, asked if I would be interested in doing the same thing with him. But the problem is he did a lot of medical malpractice defense work, and I refused to do any work for insurance companies. So that was a deal killer out of the box, but he had a division within his practice that did consumer class action work. So I met with the three lawyers there, and we all agreed, with my friend's blessing, to form a new entity called Finkelstein, Blankenship, Frey, Pearson, and Garber, and that is a 100% consumer class action firm. And then most recently, as you mentioned, I lecture to lawyers all across the country. I help lawyers as much as I can. One lawyer who was in one of the classes that I was presenting, we just struck up a relationship and asked me to come on and help him with several of his most significant cases, which I did. And we developed just a great working relationship. And he then asked me to join his firm and do the same for his firm as I've done for the other firms, which we agreed to do. And that is Mark Diller Law up in Massachusetts.
Wow. So that's why I said empire, by the way. Fair. I mean,
I don't know.
Because
I don't feel that way.
Well, empire isn't in the sense of what are these brands worth? This is the way that you're doing business is very unconventional. And you're talking about being paperless back in the 80s and 90s. Most of the attorneys today are not paperless. And
Right.
So you're a visionary in your own way. And I think that's why the word empire is appropriate, because you have done things out of the box. And so my follow-up question to what you just said is the idea that one day you sell these brands or the equity in these brands, or what is sort of the game plan or the final exit when you decide you no longer want to practice law?
I don't have one. The whole story I just went through, when it's easy to roll off my tongue easily, but it wasn't planned out. Not one of those relationships did I seek out. Each of them came to me and presented opportunities. I've had other opportunities which I've declined, but here I don't have a master plan when it comes to that. But, when you say I'm different than other lawyers, it may be true, but I don't view, I never viewed the core business of what we do as practicing law. We are lawyers, we practice law, we do it really well. But in the beginning, I viewed what we do as a pure service industry that is grounded in technology. So I really viewed us as a technology firm that happened to practice law.
Right.
And when we viewed ourselves as a technology company, I had an IT staff of 15 at one time. It's all our own. There were no off-the-shelf case
Right.
management systems. We created our own case management system. There was no off-the-shelf document management system. None of these things existed when we started, and we undertook. Now, to do what I accomplished, to do it now, it would be, I'm not going to suggest that it's easy, but it would be much, much easier because there are
And less expensive.
off-the-shelf products, much less expensive, for sure, much less.
So, I mean, you have such a cool story. Your father was a lawyer. He wanted you to be a lawyer, and you're like, Dad, leave me alone. I'm going to college. I'm going to major in double finance and marketing. And then you go work your first job you hate. You were working at a brokerage, right?
Right.
And then you were thinking about going back to school for an MBA until you meet a billionaire. And that changed the trajectory of your life. Tell me that story.
I was at a wedding, and it was Larry Tisch, Tisch Company. So he owned the New York Giants, CNA Insurance Company, Lowe's Hotel, a significant business person, and it just coincidentally was at an affair that he was at, and I wasn't going to lose the opportunity to speak with him. So I introduced myself, and I was 21, 22, something like that. And said, I'm at a crossroads where I know I'm going to go back to school, but I'm not too clear on which is the best path related to business, because my goal was to be an entrepreneur. And his guidance, not when I say guidance, suggestion was law school over an MBA. Primarily, he said, if you look at Fortune 500 CEOs, the majority of them are lawyers as opposed to having an MBA. I don't know if that's true today, but it certainly was true back then. And there were very few joint JD MBA programs back then. There are a lot of schools that offer it now. So I went to law school.
So was the goal to be a lawyer so that you could be a more powerful businessman and then maybe one day be a billionaire? Was that the thought process of a 21-year-old?
No, money was never the driving force. It was to do what was fun, what I enjoyed. And that's what I enjoyed. I'm a firm believer, if you work really hard and you do a really good job, the money will follow. If you're making choices and decisions and your first choice and decision is based on money, the net result is you're not going to be happy. So I choose mental health and happiness before money.
Yeah. Well, you were a wise young man. So let me understand. You go to law school, you come out of law school, you go to practice with your dad, but you're like, I'm probably going to leave. I'm not going to.
I had no intention of practicing with my dad when I went to law school. What happened was I was married in law school, and I always worked throughout law school. And while I'm working, the place where I was working offered me a position, but I knew I had no interest in work. It was a law firm I was working at. I had no interest in practicing, so I didn't want to really screw them over. They invested in me to work there, and then I'm looking for another job. I just didn't think that was it. I didn't think it was right, so I chose not to do it. But I also wasn't sure how to get a job in business coming out of law school, certainly out of Brooklyn Law School. At the time, nobody was coming to Brooklyn, no businesses coming to Brooklyn Law School to interview. So, I just thought it was important to make the right strategic choice as to what I would go do. And I wasn't sure, but I still wanted to work. And I thought, well, maybe I can work for my dad for a little bit. And we had a great relationship. I'd say, I'm coming to work here until I get the job I want to get. So I called him up and asked him specifically that, I'm thinking about coming to join the firm. And I just want to kick it around with you if it's a good idea or not. And he said, all right, let's have lunch. And I said, okay. And we scheduled lunch for some time because we're like an hour and a half apart. It wasn't like we could just shoot over. So then the next day he calls me up. He says, I'm so happy. And my partners are so happy. Well, why are your partners happy? Because you're joining the firm. So what do you mean I'm joining the firm? I'm going to talk to you as to whether or not it's a good idea to join the firm. He said, no, I'm telling you, it's a good idea. The only problem is that when I married my wife, she asked me to promise her that we would never move up to the Hudson Valley because she wanted to be in the city. And that created somewhat of a conflict for me. So I hung up the phone and said to my wife, we got a little bit of a problem, but it worked out great.
Yeah. Very cool story. So you get married rather young and you have children while you're in law school or after?
After law school. I had my middle child, my daughter, my middle girl, when I was getting an MBA. My son I had after I was practicing a bit.
Yeah. But still sort of in the early stages of your career, right? You're married, you're a family man.
Oh yeah,
you're
most
raising
definitely.
kids and you go head first into law, right?
For sure. The day after I was admitted, I was picking my first jury. I went from one trial to the next to the next. During that period of time, I had my son when I was, I don't know, 29, 30, something like that.
Yeah.
And then my daughter when I was 32, 33, and then my youngest.
Yeah. So has it been challenging raising a family and being so dedicated to the business and to practicing law, right? Just always understanding that there is these two aspects of what you do. Tell me about that balance.
I'm going to give you a totally different answer than I think my wife and kids would give you. Okay. Right? I can only speak for myself. I thought that balance is a big time challenge and it's hard, but you got to define what your priorities are. And I believe I was always there for my kids and my wife, but they were awesome and understood that if I had a trial going on, that took priority during that window of time, right? So, and it's the way I operate our practices, that when you're on trial or you have something important from a professional perspective, you have to give 150% time, energy, and effort, so that when you're not in that crunch time, I'll say trial time, it's okay to take a little extra time, do whatever with your family and so on. So, it's that work-life balance is the challenge of everybody. And if you hide from it, you're not going to do a good job at it. If you make some conscious choices, as with certainly I did it with my wife, you have to be vocal about it.
Yeah. I experience a lot of this in my own life. And every time I have a guest on, we talk about this because I didn't know how to cope with it. I have two kids. I have a business. My husband has his business, and I'm dedicated. I really want to be a wife and a mom, but I also love exploring my personal growth, whether it's through business or through other ways. And so I'm always investing in myself. I go to personal development seminars. I go to meditation seminars. And so the biggest struggle I have is like this pull and push between all of the things that I want to do. I've been very hard on myself at times, and other times I'm like, I mean, this is real life. I don't think that anybody has it figured out. So hearing it from other people to some extent is comforting to me. So my husband is supportive, and the kids are young still, but it's worked out.
Look, I couldn't have a better relationship than I have with my wife. We have and always have, and I give her all of the credit. And the reason why is, and I'm very fortunate that she sets the bar very, very low for me. Totally serious, right?
What's the bar?
Well, I'll tell you what I mean, but she sets that bar real low, and it's easy for me to step over. And early on in my career, I would call her, but even before we had kids, and once we had kids, it was pretty consistent, where I would call and say, whatever time it was, hypothetically 5:30. All right, I'm done. I'm on my way home.
Yeah.
And then my phone would ring, and then somebody else would call me. And then the next thing you know, it's 7:00 and I walk in. And we went through a period of time where she'd be angry at that, rightfully so. And I would apologize and it would be heartfelt that I didn't mean for it to happen, but this is what happens in business. And she came to the realization and said, look, it is what it is. And either I'm going to embrace it and figure out how we can work on this together, or we're going to be, I'll be continuously disappointed. So we came up with a very simple solution. I get, this is her, she understands that I have to do what I have to do. It's my goal and intention to come home at a reasonable time, which the majority of the time I do. But there are times things come up where I have to direct my attention to it. So it's very simple. I don't call and say I'm coming home until I'm in the car.
Smart.
That's it.
Right.
That's it. Right. How can I, then she knows I'm really on my way. She understood. It's not like I would say I'm on my way and I wasn't, I really was, but things would happen. So that's what I mean by setting the bar low. Right.
Yeah. Do you work from home at all?
Sure. Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So are there once a certain time you stop taking calls and responding to text messages, are there boundaries like that after a certain time of day with family?
Well, when I walk in my house, I put my phone by my keys, and I don't have my cell phone with me.
Okay.
I definitely take calls, don't get me wrong, but it's not like I'm walking around with my phone and doing emails and so on.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, no, same here. I work from home, so I do a lot of work from home, and sometimes it goes until 8, 9 o'clock at night. But my husband owns his business, so he understands the importance of running a business and being available. So it's been really good in that regard. But still, I think the challenge that I feel within myself is I want more time off. I want more quality time with kids. I want us to get away more often. We own our businesses. We should be able to just pick up and go. And it's really not that simple, as you know, especially in the business that we're in.
Right.
Yeah. So I know tech is an area that you started investing resources early on. Tell the audience some of the decisions you've made along the way. And the long-term benefits you've enjoyed because of those decisions. So you said you developed your own technology, you put it to work, you had a team. Did you have to go through growth cycles, or how did you maintain over time?
I'm not sure what you mean by growth cycles and maintain. We just get growing and growing. I'm not sure what you're asking, but I can answer with respect to the technology. The technology, I always viewed, I am not a computer programmer, but I just know what technology can do for us. And I would just tell the programmers, this is what has to happen, and then they would make it happen. So
Okay.
I distill it down to a few different things, very simple concepts that what we really do, my practice is we just gather information, and then we deliver that information in a different format. So we just broke it down into those two very big buckets. Who do we gather information from, and what is that process, and how can we streamline it? And then who do we have to deliver it to, and how can we streamline that? So we gather information from our clients, police departments, vendors, hospitals, and all of that gathering process. And then how can we then deliver it to insurance companies and defense counsel in a really efficient way? So
So you identify the need and then you customize the tech.
True. The other thing internally in our workflow and our work processes is we limit the tasks that people are required to do. So we have a very streamlined business where people have very clear identifiable responsibilities, and that's what they do, and they become experts in that. And the goal is that they don't get distracted from doing what their core competencies are. Brilliant. We don't have any generalists. We have highly specialized workforce down to I defined as being our paperless. Well, a big challenge is when you're paperless, you want to be able to access it very quickly, whatever that information is. So up front, when we image it into our case management system, and there's a lot of this that's automated, we break apart documents and name documents so that it's very easy to find the specific document you're looking for, as opposed to having to search through the electronic record. So if we get a hospital record in that's 500 pages, we break that apart to the admission records, the operative report, the nurse's notes, the prescription records, the whatever it may be. And it's very easy to find things as opposed to
going through, papers. Yeah. So
but let me just so we have two people who all they do are break apart those medical records and tag them in the proper way. And then we do the same on the legal side, where we have people who are dedicated. We don't just have a generalist who scans records in. We have trained people who know how to read medical records and to categorize them properly, and to obviously make sure they get to the right spot.
So you go through the process of, whenever you're developing the tech, you then train people and specialize people to get really good at that piece. And then you sort of just add on layers as needed, depending on what the function is. That's what I meant by growth cycle, is just implementing new ways of streamlining and handling the day-to-day.
Yeah, I would. The answer is yes, but just your term add on, sometimes it's break apart.
Okay.
using my example of we call imaging, our imaging department, it's not adding on, it's breaking apart the records that come in. So we broke apart the medical from the legal.
Yeah.
Right? Not adding on, but breaking it apart. We'll look at somebody's job and see how I can break it down so that they are hyper specialized.
And
so
how many?
As a good example, for pleadings purposes, litigation purposes, in New York, there are some municipalities that require, if you're going to file a claim against them, that requires a special document called a notice of claim or a notice of intention to file suit, which is one document, but it is a highly specific, important document. I have one person who does all of them for every case.
Wow.
That's all she does.
Yeah. How many people?
And when you do that, she gets pretty good at it. I assure you, she's better than any lawyer who does it when they do everything else.
Right.
That's not that it's not reviewed by an attorney, of course it is, but she does all the prep work and knows exactly what has to go in, and broken down by each separate municipality.
Mhm, mhm. Do you find the managing of the workforce challenging or time consuming, or how do you spend your time essentially? Or is that like an evolution as everything else?
Yeah, of course. It all depends on the size and um, you asked a lot of things there. How do I manage it? How do I spend my time and so on? I don't think there's anything more important that I do than my relationship with the people that work here.
Mhm.
So it's a total priority. It's changed a bit with COVID. Pre-COVID, I would make sure that I had lunch with every single person by department, not individually, every single year. And we would have different exercises. We would talk about that. I have monthly supervisor meetings. It's a balance between, over scheduling meetings. I don't overschedule meetings for sure, but I I am actively involved. Let's
Mhm.
define it that way. So we send surveys out to our clients. I get every survey every morning. That's how I start my day. And I will often forward those surveys to the people involved and give comment and so on.
Wow. That's pretty cool. You've given me a lot to think about actually as I am expanding my own infrastructure, because I'm not necessarily a detail person. I'm a big picture person. So I'm trying to figure that piece out. So let's talk.
I'll comment on that too. I'm a big picture person
Yeah.
that delegates a lot. I delegate a lot, but when you delegate, you can't be a big picture person. You have to delegate with great specificity.
Yeah.
You have to micromanage when you delegate, for sure. I've seen over and over again, people delegate something and they just delegate it without micromanaging the delegation. And then what happens is they get the work product back, or the task isn't done in the way that they wanted it done. And they get angry at the person who did it when they should be looking in the mirror, because the fault lies on the person who delegated it. So if I delegate something and something doesn't come back the way that I expected it to, the first thing I do is look at the instructions that I gave, as opposed to come down on the person who brought it to me. But if the instructions were crystal clear and it doesn't come back that way, then it's a different conversation.
Do you mean, because micromanaging and giving clear instructions, like that to me is two different things a little bit, at least in my head, my perception.
So what you didn't hear is micromanage the delegation.
The delegation. Got it.
And then after I delegate, I'm totally hands off.
Removed. Okay. Got it.
After you delegate, if you micromanage after that, then why'd you delegate it?
Yeah.
Right. All I'm emphasizing is if you're going to delegate it, you better do it right. Spend the time to delegate it in the right way, so it's clear.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the clients you represent with this well-oiled machine of an infrastructure that you build. It's obvious to me that you pull a lot of meaning by caring for your clients. You've created a culture of caring. You wrote a book called I Hope We Never Meet, which I think I already told you. It's a very, very good title. For our audience, this is the book. And I highly recommend, because it's really not what you think it would be when you first start reading it. You just think it's going to be about how it all works, but there's a lot of emotion, and you can easily relate to this book, even if you're not a person that suffered a tragedy reading the book looking for guidance. So I highly recommend to my audience. What prompted the desire to write this book?
The desire was, I meet with a lot of clients right at the beginning of their case, and I would tell them stories about how to get through the situation they're in from other clients and how they were able to get through the situation that they were faced with. And I found that clients were very appreciative of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to have a format that I could touch more clients. So the motivation was really to write a book that I'm going to give every one of my existing and prior clients and future clients.
Yeah. Yeah. In your introduction, you say that when you meet clients, they're in your office, they're never obviously happy to be there, but you're glad to meet them, and that there was something, this is deep. There was something heroic about them, not because of the injury or the loss or the strength in telling their story, but because of the strength it takes to redirect their lives. I thought that was really powerful. And I felt the authenticity in reading that. Where does your passion to seek justice come from?
It totally flows from my clients, 100%.
Yeah.
When you sit with somebody and they're counting on you to make things right for what they've gone through,
Mm-hmm.
I don't need anything else. I take it very personally.
Mm-hmm.
I take on my clients' causes very personally.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I need.
Yeah. You experienced a loss earlier, I believe, in life. You lost your mother. How old were you when you lost your mother?
24, 25. I just joined my dad's firm.
Was that a defining sort of moment for you, I assume, in terms of how you dealt with the loss?
The romantic story would be, yes, it turned my life around, and no, it was a tremendous loss, but I wouldn't define it, just being brutally honest, I wouldn't define it as a defining moment in my life. It was a loss that was premature, never should have happened, but it taught me a lot about suffering and pain and sorrow, but
Yeah.
I and which allowed me to empathize much more with my clients had that not happened. But I wouldn't define it as a defining moment.
Yeah. I can see that. I can understand that. And just to say a little bit more, you talk about your parents in the book, and your mother, Diane. She raised 3 boys and made it look easy, you say in the book. You've set up a charity in her name that helps families in crisis. Is that a way for you to continue staying connected to? Do you do this for your clients, or is it anybody who needs the help, the assistance?
Anybody who needs the help and the assistance. It's run by a separate organization. All proceeds from this book go to that organization. I make contributions every year to that organization, but I'm removed from the process. And it was a passion of hers, and it's become a passion of mine. We set up this fund to anybody who has a particular crisis that was unexpected, that you need some financial assistance to get through whatever is going on at any particular time. There are funds available.
Yeah.
And it's really just to help people in the community that, need help.
Mm-hmm. You reference in the book that when terrible things happen to people, that there is a larger narrative, there is a story. What do you mean by that?
we're all interconnected in some way, and I believe, and you can't just look at when a tragedy happens as just in isolation, and you want to do what I think of as a root cause analysis. What is it that brought this tragedy about? And when we can get down to that root cause, maybe we can then put things in place to fix it so it doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So most of the clients, obviously, that you meet are on survival. They're facing some practical or emotional or physical or financial challenge. And
I'll give you an example. Let me give you a simple example. 2 weeks ago, I met with a gentleman whose son was just struck by a car. And at the scene, he was a pedestrian, had his leg amputated. Just yesterday, he had to have his other leg amputated. And this morning, he sent me pictures of what his son is going through. And he wants to do everything to help his son, but is at a loss and doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
You know, and it never should have happened.
Right.
The way it happened, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it for me personally, I don't need much more than that to know that there's somebody that I could help. And given the experiences that I've had, I'll do everything I can to help them.
Yeah. But, you know, these cases take a long time sometimes, and a lot happens between the time of the accident or tragedy all the way to the case resolution. There's a lot of turmoil. Obviously, you're with them during the most, you know, upheaval they're experiencing. They're overwhelmed. How do you manage that emotion, especially if you're working the case, you've got that personal relationship with the client, several clients, several cases? Is that, do you put a lot of time every day in the client relation, or how do you build the relationship with the clients?
It's time.
Yeah.
No doubt. I mean, I text, I give my cell phone, I call. I had a client this past Sunday call me at 9:00 in the morning. He was at something happened where he wanted to call me just before we got on this call. I got a text from a client whose trial is starting on Monday. He's on his way to the hospital. It is being there, but I tell every client that there's only so much time in the day, and they have to be respectful of my time, and I will always get back to them. But if I have some time constraints, I just tell them.
Yeah.
Right. That I think most professionals, or not defined lawyers, they have problems when they aren't forthright as to now's not a good time. I've never had a client say, "Oh, no, I insist right now."
Right.
I have no problem saying now is not a good time. I'll tell you when is a good time, and whenever I make that promise, that's when I speak to them. So, it's the silence that drives people crazy, drives me crazy.
Agreed. And I think that is, in our business overall, a big challenge, because, you know, sometimes lawyers are good lawyers, but they don't really focus on the infrastructure and having people to answer the phones. And let me not go into mass torts and class actions, but we're just talking in general. That is a big piece. You're representing people, and they want to get a hold of you in times of needs. And so it's not intentional. I think even for the people that do it, it's just the business side of things that we're talking about, making sure you have structure. So you talk about being a doorstop. You know, you give the example of the 2 doors in the courtroom, and holding the smaller courtroom door open for people who are willing to come in and take on Goliath. Tell me about the symbolic meaning of the 2 courtroom doors, or tell the audience what exactly you meant by that.
If anybody did some research, they would see very quickly that these big corporations are the one who access courts all the time, and they want that big door open all the time for them to go sue one another. And the litigation is driven from corporation against corporation, whether it's based on intellectual property, or contracts, and they have an attitude that the courts are for them, not for individuals. So they then, at the same time, they want all the court and access to the judicial system open to them without any obstruction. They then go forward on the other side of their mouth and say, there's too many cases, too many individual cases is what they say, and that we should have tort reform. And they try to close the door down for individuals to seek justice and civil justice. And that's the second door that I'm talking about, that we always have to make sure we have our foot, holding it open and making sure it never closes. Because if corporations had their way, they would do everything they could to close that second door.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that in almost all areas of law. It's sort of the norm.
I'll give you a perfect example using mass tort cases. Johnson and Johnson, last thing they want to do is have these mesothelioma cases prosecuted, right? So they try every which way to change the laws so that they can't bring actions and limit people's individual rights. But when they need to sue somebody for taking, let's say, the compound of baby powder and start selling it, who's the first one in the courtroom? They are. And they want to make sure they have unfettered access to enforce their rights while trying to hold down individual rights.
Yeah, it's something that it's shaken our industry, by the way, to its core. And I was talking to Mark Lanier on a separate podcast because he tried that case against Johnson and Johnson. And I asked him about the judge's opinion, and he said that judge, whatever law school that judge went to, must have not talked about a constitutional right of a citizen to go to court and have their case tried. So it's really scary in many regards. And you do talk about the defense attorney organizations fight to convince the public opinion that all of these lawsuits, that, by the way, there's just more and more and more, right, over time, they're frivolous. They're not real lawsuits and are a big problem because they raise insurance costs for everybody else. I mean, how is that rhetoric still being used? Like, is it working, or has it worked, do you think, for the public?
Yeah, I think it has an impact. The more it gets said and the more it's repeated, it definitely has an impact, no doubt.
Yeah.
That's why they do it. They did it intentional and strategically. And you talk about law schools. My son is at I don't want to brag on him, but a very, very, one of the top law schools. Mm-hmm. And he's born and raised with me. So he's cut from the same cloth, and he's been with me when I've gone and seen clients. And he just last night, he said, I've learned nothing about state law, and I've learned nothing about individual rights. Everything is federal and corporate based. Wow. And that's what these big schools, these top tier law schools are pumping out.
Yeah, that's crazy. Because, you want to go be a lawyer so that you can be David against Goliath. I mean,
not everybody.
I guess when you represent somebody's best interest, or you're representing them while they're in a time of need, you do feel like you're taking on the fight in that sense. But I understand not every practice of law.
And I'm not in any way suggesting that defendants aren't entitled to lawyers in a defense. They absolutely are.
Right.
But you mentioned the term frivolous cases. I would promise you there are far more frivolous defenses than there are frivolous cases.
Yeah.
But you never hear about the frivolous defenses.
Right. Yeah. So how do we trust companies, that build our homes, that, the cleaning products, the food that we eat? You say in the book that humans have this inherent sort of way of just wanting to trust that the fellow humans working at these companies are doing the right things. Do you as a lawyer lose faith in humanity when you see all the craziness that goes on with these big corporations and cases, especially in the tragic cases and their defenses?
I actually don't, because I recognize it's the minority of the decision makers who make some bad decisions, whether it be for profit or they're lazy or what. You can figure it out, but it's not the majority of corporations or people. But there are bad apples, and when those bad apples act bad, that's what we need to do, is root them out and do the best to get rid of them if the corporations don't do it themselves. And then I always ask, how did the corporation allow this to happen? But it happens in every industry.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. I don't cast a broad brush and assume everybody's bad. I'm the exact opposite. I presume everybody's good, and there were just a couple bad apples that it shouldn't have happened. But the real test is, once that happens, what do they choose to? They, meaning the corporations, choose to do once they know it. There are very few. There are some who act honorably and stand up and do the right thing. I'll just define it that way. But the vast majority of them make a bad choice, and they choose to blame the victim when they are blameless, and interpose frivolous defenses. Mm-hmm. And all that does is make my clients dig in their heels that much more, and make them want to move forward with a trial. I'm right in the middle of a trial right now. That's exactly what's going on.
Yeah. Wow. So I see this book as sort of a roadmap for clients to know what to expect next, as you mentioned earlier. You talk about the emotional piece, but you also talk about the legal aspects of the case, like the experts and mediation and how insurance companies work and juries. But you also obviously go to talk about the importance of preserving and protecting your client's integrity and humanity. But there are times when justice fails, right? Justice fails. How do you handle it or guide your clients if you don't win a trial, or if you can't settle the case for the amount that you were hoping to?
I look at my role as not outcome oriented. I look at my role as information oriented. My job is to inform and educate clients. Most of the time, I cannot control the outcome. It's what insurance companies choose to offer. They assess their risk. They make that assessment based on what's the underlying facts of the case, who the lawyer is, meaning me or my firm, and what the harm and damages that were caused. But I can't control what dollar amount they ultimately offer. And I also can't control what a jury does, truly control. I can do my best to influence and have the best outcome possible, but I can't precisely predict the future. I could just say this is what's likely. So my role isn't really outcome oriented. It's information based, and when I sit down with clients, my job is to educate and inform them as to the risks they're facing, and let them know it's their case, it's not mine. And whatever they want me to do, and I work for them, that's what I do. But as long as they knew what the risk was, which if the risk is a verdict is less than what's being offered, and I explain that, that was their choice. And as long as they made an informed, educated choice, am I happy with it? Of course, I'm not happy. But you say, how do I cope with it? I have no problem coping with it as long as I did my job.
Right. And you gave it all you could, right? And yeah.
That's a given.
Yeah. You talk about deny and delay and defend by your counterparties. This is what insurance companies do when they fail to prevent the predictable. You tell the stories of Audie and David and Lily and Eddie and Jose. Eddie and Jose were actually the children of Martina and who was the client now? I forget the name.
I smile because all of those names are made up.
Oh,
right?
Okay. So they're not real people. Or I'm sorry, they're not real names, but
they're not real names because I didn't want to, I didn't want to impose on anyone. So when you say those names, I hear them all, but I don't, if you give me the facts, I know them instantly and I know who the clients were, but I wouldn't take anybody's real case. Each of those chapters really are about 5 or 7 cases that I aggregated the facts and that's similar.
Yeah.
But the deny, delay, defend really is just the mantra of insurance companies, and their ultimate business goal is hope people quit. Because if they have you have to think on a real macro level. If they have 1,000 claims that come in, and they create these obstacles, and 500 of the people quit because of the obstacles, and then by denying, 500 drop off. And then delaying, another 300 drop off, and then defending, another 100 drop off. So I'm down to 100 cases or 200 cases. I didn't do the math in my head what I broke it down to. Yeah. And they pay on those 200 cases. They really owed on 1,000 cases. So they're making money hand over fist. People forget about what is not on the blackboard, what they don't see. And what they don't see are all the people that dropped off that had valid claims. And because of that deny, delay, and defend attitude, that's where they're making so much money.
Yeah. It's really a terrible story of profits over people. And
absolutely.
I think
insurance companies can put me out of business, and all of my colleagues who do what I do, they could put Mark Lanier out of business. I'm good friends with Mark. Any of us out of business instantly. You want to know how? Do the right thing.
Yeah.
You know something's wrong, pay the full value of the claim instantly to the people and move on. But they can't, they create in their own mind, but what about all the fraud? It doesn't exist. Yeah. Right? They find 1 or 2 out of thousands and thousands and create a story to suggest that that's the norm when it is so far from it. But
yeah, you talk about the one of the ways to healing and closure for clients is when the insurance companies acknowledge what was done, apologize, and do the right thing.
That's what I was just talking about. They can't do it.
Yeah. So what would you say? You say some companies do and some don't. I'm assuming that the majority don't, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I see you in this role of seeking closure for them. And closure is another word for me for healing, to wanting to move on and wanting to, again, rebuild their lives, create a new normal. How does repentance and forgiveness, if you're not getting it from the insurance company, how can you provide that to your client and leaving the outcome, the monetary aspect out of it? What happens in the personal dynamic so that you can send them their way and they get the closure and the healing and they're ready to start over? Does that, I know it's a long question, but I think you probably understand, you know what I mean.
The answer is I can't get the insurance company or the wrongdoer to apologize or to acknowledge their wrong in any way. And it's up, but they can through word, I can't get them to acknowledge it in words, but I certainly can in action. And the action is a financial resolution. So I don't care what they say. If it's somebody's paying millions of dollars, if they don't apologize through words, they're apologizing through actions. Okay?
Yeah.
And if my client isn't satisfied with that, then I ask a jury to do just that. And that's what the jury's verdict represents for my client. And I explain to jurors that they will deliver closure through the verdict that they vote for my client, for all they've gone through, and empower them to move on and put this behind them and carry forward, because they've been carrying this albatross around their neck, this litigation against these corporations who have chosen to blame instead of accept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just such a tough thing to navigate because, they're being blamed and then they're told that they're greedy. And then, greed is what usually these companies do when they take shortcuts and don't do what they're supposed to do to not create these accidents or tragic events in the first place. But on the most basic level, you say every client sues over their loss of enjoyment of life to defend their right in court, the Constitution of this country. How do you think a client walks away and say they have a check they put in their account? Is it your experience that that's enough for them to start a new chapter? Or are there other resources to help these people rebuild their lives?
It's all happens between the ears and behind the eyes. It's not the actual dollar amount, it's what that represents. That's the easiest way for me to say it. With clients who have catastrophic injuries, if you ask them the day before, in 3 years, 5 years, I'll be handing you a check for $7-10 million, 15, whatever the number is. The bigger the number, the faster they say, I would never go through it again to get that. Okay. So, but the dollar amount represents something to them, and whatever it is, hopefully it allows them to move forward. It's not the dollar amount, but they say, I'm going to hold this person accountable, and then they get satisfaction that they did, or I'm going to stand up for the loved one that I lost, and by doing this, and by recovering something, then I stood up for them. Okay, I did the right thing. We just took a verdict yesterday. One of my partners just took a verdict yesterday, where I won't go through the whole story, but a 24-year-old medical student who was an outstanding kid. They rent a Airbnb, and it's advertised as an Airbnb next to a shallow pond, where you can go out on the pond and use kayaks or whatever. The owner of the house shows up, and it's 10 or 12 medical students want to take a weekend, and there's a pond. Sure enough, it's there, but the owner didn't tell the medical students that at the other end of this much larger pond, there's a power company that uses it and sucks the water, and when the not the generators, I forget what they're called, to generate the power, it creates a tremendous undercurrent that you can't see. And that there's a law that says anybody who provides a boat of any kind, a boat, it's a navigation law, must provide a personal flotation device. He gives my client a kayak, who got an A in swimming. He took swimming in college, a very strong swimmer. doesn't know. He's out in the water, and it tips because the currents start going, and he gets sucked under, and he ultimately dies. And there's no insurance. And most other law firms would have said, well, let's just say we give up on that, and there's no insurance. We said, you want closure, we're going to get you closure. And the jury yesterday found, they came in and had all kinds of crazy defenses, and found that they were fraudulent against all these medical students, because never disclosed about this water, the power company,
The power plant, or
a power plant, never disclosed that there were signs posted all up and down on the trees, this is not appropriate for swimming. Right? But what happened is the person wanted to rent their property, so they created an image of something that didn't exist and exposed them to total dangers that only the owner of the property, knew about. And now the family is going to have some measure of satisfaction. It's not about the money. It's about that this person did this to their child.
I can't imagine the loss of a child and the circumstances like that. And you think, why? Something so preventable, so easily disclosed on a line, in the description of the property, or it's really
how about he had personal flotation devices, life preservers, and he never brought them down, just gave him the kayaks. Wow. There are lots of tragedy to it, but focusing on the parents felt that they had to do something.
Yeah.
Right? So we were the vehicle with which they could do something.
Yeah.
It's not just about money.
I worked on a case where a family lost their son in college due to suicide, and was one of the cases that touched me the most. As you know, I'm in the financial planning, settlement planning, and I too get pretty involved and invested in these cases. And it was tragic because the families were well off. They didn't need the money. They just wanted to hold the school accountable because their son had gone and seen a counselor and said that he was suicidal, and they had done nothing essentially to prevent it. And they certainly wouldn't tell the parents because he was considered an adult. And so it's just to see, and the school just would not apologize, right? What an insult to injury. But it's stories like that that are moving and make you think about existential questions in life. A question I have for you is, do you think our justice system works? Is it a justice system that
totally 100%?
Okay.
Huge believer.
Yeah.
Definitely does. Gives people an opportunity to have their form decided by fair, impartial people, no doubt.
I saw in your bio that you lecture lawyers about the science in the courtroom and litigating a pharmaceutical case or structured settlements. And I've been in the business of settlement planning for 10 years, and I wanted to understand how you guide people once they get their recovery to make good, smart financial decisions with their money.
I think it's too late if you're doing it after they get their money. I start that process if it's a very substantial case. A year before a potential resolution. The pressure of whether to settle or not to settle is big enough. The added pressure of, okay, now is this enough to last the rest of my life for my medical needs or whatever other needs there are, to dump that on a client all at the same time is, I personally would never do it. So I start that process months and months before a potential resolution, so that they can understand what happens when the money's moving. They don't lock in a plan, but they have some thoughts on what that plan will be. And that allows them, and it's under the same umbrella of or in the same bucket of educating and informing.
Yeah.
Right. The amount of stress and pressure people feel when a lawyer hands them a check and says this has to last the rest of your life, when they don't necessarily have the financial acumen or experience of dealing with significant monies, is a tremendous stress and pressure. And most lawyers, in my experience, don't do anything about it, and I think they should.
The majority of the time I get a call after the case has been settled, even though I always ask my clients to call me before mediation. And I want to meet the clients. I want to create a relationship and be able to customize and do what's right for them. But you're a very intuitive man, very thoughtful, very reflective. I appreciate your time today. And yeah, this was a wonderful book. Thank you for sharing with me, and thank you for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, take care. Thank
The
you.
book, that is.
Both.
Yep.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.